Hey everyone, it's another Thursday, so I figured it was time for me to release yet another video. And today I am going to be taking part in another book tag that is 10 weird bookish questions. Hey everyone, it's Ray. Welcome to my little bookish corner of the world. I don't know if you can see, but I've had a few new additions in the last week, and I will be doing a tiny book haul in the very near future. But today I am going to be doing a book tag that I saw literally just this morning when I was watching Jesse the Reader. I quite like his videos, I find him really funny. And it is a challenge, a tag that originated 3 years ago by Sean D. Steadfast, and I will post a link to the original video as well as Jesse's in the notes below. I figured this was a perfect challenge for me because some of the questions were like, yeah, I've seen myself, I've done those things, I remember doing some of those things, so I figured it was perfect for me. And sorry, I cannot decide which way to part my hair today, so we're having one of those afternoons. Anyway, I'm going to start the first question. Weirdest place you have ever bought a book, and was it a keeper? I really had to think on this one because I suppose what I consider weird when I bought the book, probably, in fact, I know it's not weird now because I've seen so many posts about people saying, oh, look what I found on my train station platform. So yeah, it was at a train station, and it was actually I was waiting there. I live in a small town, and we have 3 train stations spread about the equivalent of 2 to 3 minute journeys apart. But they are, when it comes to the actual traveling to the station, it takes a lot longer to get there. On foot or by bike, and I don't drive, and that's a whole other story. But this particular day it was absolutely chucking it down with rain, and because of that some of the station areas had flooded really badly and they weren't letting as many trains through, so I had a huge delay on my train going into the city for work, and I commuted an hour and 20 minutes each way, and oh, I absolutely hated it. I never ever want to do it again. Anyway, that's beside the point. I went in to sit in what I suppose is the ticket office, really tiny little area, and to one side they had a battered old bookcase, and I don't know if it was books that had been abandoned on trains, abandoned at the station, donated, collected from a charity shop or what, but they had a really small collection on this battered old bookcase of books that had probably seen better days. They'd been well loved, I suppose. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get one of those. And there was a little box. I suppose it was a Goodwill, it was a trust box, really. You were asked to donate what you thought the book was worth, but you couldn't take one unless you were paying something. And the guard was quite watchful because it wasn't a very busy station. So I bought a book, and I can't remember what it was, but I just remember thinking at the time, this is really weird place to have charity books, or is it something that the guy's bought from home and he's selling them because he wants to get rid of them, sort of like a car boot situation in a train station. But now you find, I know that I think Exeter Station and a few other stations in London, Penguin has put up a machine, almost like an automator, a machine where you can buy best-selling books, only obviously from that publisher, but you can buy best-selling books. And I've seen so many posts where people have said, oh, I've just come across this at Exeter Station or at another station, fantastic idea, I've got my book for the journey. Great thing. But I always wonder how badly battered the books are when they come out of the machine at the bottom, because unless it's lined with velvet and they've got a little hand grabbing them out, they aren't going to fall in a very good way, right? Anybody used it? Have you found that your books come out with bent edges or bent pages? Or are they in perfect condition when they come out of the bottom of those book dispensers at the stations? I'd love to know. Anyway, so that's the weirdest place I personally bought a book. And obviously it wasn't a keeper because I can't even remember what it was. But that said, it was probably 12, 13 years ago. Have you ever read a book in public that had a strange title that can be interpreted in a different way and got strange looks? I can immediately say no to this, though I did often read. I'm looking at my top bookcase over there, and it has Fabio covers because I've got the complete works of Joanna Lindsay, and I'm going to post a couple of images up here because you can't see that particular bookcase. And they have got, I suppose, the cliched bodice ripper covers, and they do stand out. And I used to read them absolutely everywhere. And another set of books that I read quite a lot of when I was commuting home from my college school job was Mills and Boon or Harlequin romances, but the original romances rather than what they are now. I mean, they have changed a lot in the 20, 30 years since I read them. They used to have photograph covers or art covers, very, very different to the ones they have now. And the titles were all Kidnapped by the Sheikh and things like that. And they probably still are. You can probably find that particular style of Mills and Boon in charity shops across the country, but they aren't for sale anymore. They seem to have changed their marketing. But that is the kind of book that I would often read and get weird looks for, rather than it was nothing to do with the titles. What strange and wonderful things have you found in new and used books? I haven't found strange and wonderful things in new books, but I used to buy a lot of used books when I was first building my collection decades ago. When I was about 16, I had a job working in Superdrug, which is I suppose the equivalent of a CVS, and I would quite often go. There were a large selection of amazing secondhand bookshops not that far from where I was working, and I used to spend my generous 30-minute lunch break browsing Kim's Bookshop, Badger's Bookshop. Neither of those are in my local town any longer, but they had a brilliant collection and a fantastic selection of books that I would often just go in and buy pretty much anything because I just wanted books and I didn't care what condition they were in. So I would find things like bus tickets. I think I found a couple of cinema tickets and things for really, well, not old films, but films from the late 70s, very, very early 80s, because this was only 1990. So yeah, it was interesting to see where other people were taking their books. Having said that, I recently picked up a book I hadn't read in probably 15 years and found an old bus pass in it that I'd used as a bookmark at a certain point, obviously at the end of a work week. And I could still read the date of the ticket, and it was 1996. So yeah, I found weird things that I've put in books as well. Is smelling a book weird to you or part of the book buying stroke reading process? I'm a book sniffer. I'm a proud book sniffer. I think that there is something inherently incredible about the smell of books. More older books than new books. There's related to a funny incident I had in a bookstore. Apparently the ink is now different, so books no longer smell the same as they did. I have a few antique books. I'm trying to find them. I have a few incredible antique books, like this one, which is a very, very old Charles Dickens I inherited from my great uncle. Well, my great uncle, it was passed down through the generations. This is from 1884, and it has the most incredible, it's kind of musty vanilla sweet and leather. It just smells incredible. And new books do not have the same aroma, even if they're hardback. Yeah, this just smells amazing. But this is, I'm not a fan of Charles Dickens, so the fact that I have these, and yeah, they are in a little bit of poor condition, but they came to me that way in my defense. I just have made sure that they aren't any worse than they were. But these old books, they smell amazing, and if somebody could bottle this, I'd use it as a perfume. Do you have any odd or weird book buying, book collecting, or reading habits? I always have to have at least one book on the go when I start new books. So right now I am reading City of Brass. I've been reading it for over a week, but in that time I've also finished 3 other books that I started and finished while I was reading City of Brass. So if you call that a weird habit, maybe that's my weird reading habit, that I have to have a book on the go that overarches everything else that I'm reading. And I'm going to try and finish City of Brass. It's a really good book. It's not that I'm struggling to read it or anything. It's just that I need to have that one book on the go while I'm reading others. So that just happened to be the book that was there and I'd started it when other books arrived and I had certain deadlines for other things that I was reading. What is the oddest comment you've received after telling somebody you're a reader or a book collector? I don't think it's odd or weird, but a lot of people say, why do you collect the books if you're never going to read them again? And there are quite a number of books that I've unhauled because I know I'm not going to read them again. But there are also books that I have kept for sentimental reasons more than anything else. Like I've got 3 copies of The Changeover by Margaret May, which I talked about in my countdown of my favourite books. It is my all-time favourite book, and I've read some incredible novels, especially in the last few years, but that remains my all-time favourite purely for sentimental reasons more than anything else. And people don't get that, and they also don't get why I don't want to loan books out to people. The question I always ask myself when someone says, oh, can I borrow a book, is, am I going to get it back? And the second question is, what condition will I get it back in? I've loaned out a few books in recent years. Somebody's got one at the moment, and I know that it's going to come back in really good condition because she keeps on telling me how I was really, really careful reading it because I knew it was yours and it was in really good condition when I got it. But I've had other people give me books back that have got coffee stains on the pages. They've got a corner ripped out of the cover, and it makes me really anxious. So when they say, oh, why don't you loan your books out? I think that's the biggest thing when I say that I'm a book collector. Why don't you loan them out? Or why are you keeping them all if you're not going to read them? So I know that's probably not a strange question, but it feels that way to me as a book reader and collector. Describe a strange encounter you've had at a bookshop. This goes back to the book ink smell being different because they're using different book ink. I was in a bookshop probably about a year ago with a colleague from work, the same one who's borrowed one of my books, and I had just picked up something from the shelf. I was very disappointed in the rather poor showing of Agatha Christie novels. They only had 2. It's like, how can you only have 2 Agatha Christie novels on your shelves at any one time? And I'd picked up a hardback and I was smelling it, and I said to my colleague, this smells different. It doesn't smell the same. And this man from nowhere appeared and said, that's because they use different ink now, and started an entire conversation about printing processes for newer novels. It was very interesting, very educational, but at the same time, it was a very random thing to come up to a complete stranger and say, even if I was sniffing the book at that moment and saying, this doesn't smell the same as my other books. Is it odd to pass a bookshop when you're out and about and not enter? At the end of a working month, just before payday, that is probably the only time, if I'm in town or I'm by a charity shop, I won't go in, because the temptation is there to buy something when I really should not be buying it. So I managed to veer away at that point. But I have to be honest, I spend so much time perusing my the Waterstones website and World of Books and occasionally Amazon, but not as often. And considering clicking pre-order on a lot of stuff. I worked out the other day I have got 23 pre-orders in place. One of them is due in August 2025, but the rest of them are for this year. And it was not a wake up call exactly, but a kind of, oh, okay, that's a lot of books. But I don't care. They are my happy place, so I'm fine with that. Are you drawn to odd and dingy, out of the way bookshops, or do you prefer a tidy bookstore? I'm kind of OCD. That's a lie. I am OCD. And if I go into a bookshop or a charity shop and I see that there are certain things out of order, more likely to find that in a charity shop, I start putting them in alphabetical order and then ordering the alphabetical order, the authors within the author by alphabetical order for the title of the book. I can't help it. I've always done it. It makes people laugh when they realize I'm doing it. But it's also a good way to get to know the stock in the shop. More than anything, it enables me to see if they've got a book that I haven't got in a series, or they've got a nice edition of a book that I have been thinking about buying. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I have to be honest, there aren't that many out of the way dingy bookshops in my tiny town. We have recently, sadly, lost Badger's Bookshop, which was my favourite secondhand bookshop in the entirety of my town. It was my all-time favourite. It was an incredible shop. I got quite a large number of my favourite Joanna Lindsay, some Julie Garwood, Judith McNaught. I got a lot of those in that particular shop, and it doesn't exist anymore. It closed down September last year, or April it might have been last year. It closed down relatively recently in reality, and that means the only bookshop we have in the entirety of my town now is a Waterstones, and it's a small one. We do have a Works, and again, the stock isn't incredibly large because it's quite a small shop. So we don't have many bookshops in town, and certainly don't have any dingy ones. The dingy bookshops tend to be the more charity shops that we have. Books can come in odd shapes and sizes. What is the oddest shaped book you've come across? I don't think I have. I have odd shaped notebooks and post-it note things. I've got teddy bears, and I think I've got a Winnie the Pooh, Disney Winnie the Pooh shaped post-it note book, but I don't have any oddly shaped published books. I'm looking at my shelves, and no, they are all nicely shaped. They're all pretty much normal, though they do, obviously, there are a few that are different sizes, and that does annoy me a little bit, but that's pretty much it. So what about you? Do you have any are any of these odd things, well, I don't think they're odd, they're me, are any of these in any way similar to anything else that you think that you've done that you think might be odd? I really would love to know, because it's always great to get to know other people's reading habits, other people's do's and don'ts when it comes to what they read, and also how they read it. Reading habits are different for everybody. I know that the first thing I want to do when I get up in the morning is have a quick shower and then sit down with a cup of tea and a book before I start work. And I do that pretty much every single day. And it is the best way for me to start a day, when I know that a lot of people, in fact, one of my friends is a perfect example of this. She will get up, have a shower and head off straight away because she waits until the last minute to get up. I'll always wake an hour earlier so I can sit down with a book. So what are your weird reading habits? What kind of things have happened to you? And I have another weird story just as a bonus. I think the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me after I've been in a bookish place was I went to the I used to go to the library a lot, and close to our library there is a T junction with multiple crossings. And I'd just been to the library. I'd got a stack of books. I had most of them in the bag over my shoulder, and I picked one of them out and started to read it as I was crossing the road. I could hear, because it does that awful beep beep noise as the traffic lights turn red so you can walk across. It was doing that, so I felt that I was perfectly safe to do it. No cars were going to come. And I started crossing the road and I walked straight into the pole supporting the traffic light and knocked myself for 6 in the middle of the road. There were loads of people watching because it's a really busy junction. There were cars lined up waiting for the lights to turn green at 2 places, and there were lots of people crossing the road. So yeah, that was a highlight for me. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me again, and hope you enjoyed my momentary humiliation. And I will see you again next week for another video. Thank you so much for joining, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with your weirdness. Bye.